Hey, hope you're going alright. I'm Kyle. I'm the founder of Ascension Mail, and today I'm going to run through abandoned flow synergy. This is what I like to call it anyway. So, this video, it's going to be pretty quick, and I'm going to cover something that I don't see many people in the email marketing space talking about. So, this video isn't about what you should actually include content-wise in your abandoned flows. I'll make a video on that later, and if I've already made it, hopefully I'll come back and I'll link it in the description as well. Instead, this video is about how to ensure that you're not overwhelming your customers with various flows all at once, and then also only sending the most relevant and highest converting flows to them. So I'll set the scene with by just looking at the problem. So take this example, right? A customer has clicked on an email, browsed to a product page, added an item to their cart, and started checkout, but then they abandoned at this point, right? Which flow should they receive? I don't know why my mouse keeps going big like that. Before I answer the question, I'm going to briefly talk about the one major mistake that I see many brands do, and this kind of touches on the problem. So that even big brands from well-known email marketers on Twitter and YouTube, I see it all the time. The one major mistake that they're making, they're sending multiple or all of these flows at once that were triggered by that customer. So in that sequence above, you'll see that the abandoned site is going to be triggered, the abandoned browse is going to be triggered, the abandoned cart is going to be triggered, and the abandoned checkout is going to be triggered. So besides the obvious that they're overwhelming their customers with numerous emails all at once, and that results in increase in spam complaints, unsubscribes, which are all very detrimental towards your deliverability. Not only that, they're also overloading their customers with mixed marketing messages because each different flow has a different, or if done well, should have a different messaging because the person's at a different stage in the buying cycle. So it's for these two reasons that their abandoned sequences just don't convert as well as they should. And then that they also gain a reputation for being a brand that spams their customers, which is obviously not good as well. It's not all doom and gloom though. There is a solution to it. So let's get into the solution, right? So if you answered the question I asked earlier with what flow the customer should receive as the abandoned checkout flow, you'd be 100% right. So that's great. So that's because the abandoned checkout flow is one of the highest converting revenue generating flows that you can have. So it's important that it is the one, if it's been triggered, that should be sent and not any of the previous ones. So it catches people who are only 1 to 2 clicks away from checking out your product. They've shown the highest intent to purchase based off their activity, and that they've either just forgotten to check out or they're having last minute doubts. So those could include pricing, shipping options, payment options, and then also having to create an account. So the next logical question is, how do I make sure that my customers receive the abandoned checkout flow and not the others? And this is where you get your answer. So there's 2 steps to this process, and we'll get straight into the first step. So the first thing you need to do is ensure that your abandoned flows are not sending at the same time. So what I mean by this, simply the most important flow should always be being sent first. So for example, abandoned checkout, 30-minute delay, abandoned cart, 1 hour delay, abandoned browse, 1.5 hour delay, and then the abandoned site is a 2-hour delay. Side note, should always be testing these. So we want to set it up in this way because the urgency of a follow-up communication should have a direct correlation to your customer's buying intent. And I'll break this down into an example. So a customer who has just browsed your site with no specific focus, like they haven't even looked at a product, they've just gone onto your homepage, they're likely going to be put off by a follow-up email that's sent 30 minutes after they leave the website because they didn't even look at anything. So you want to get them back on the website without it feeling spammy. On the other hand, a customer who has just started checkout but got distracted might actually appreciate a reminder and see it as a helpful nudge rather than as spam. So that's the first thing. And then from a technical side, it'll allow you to set up your flow filters to work most effectively, meaning that no customers slip through the cracks and accidentally receive multiple flows at the same time. And this is the portion where I see most agencies mess up. Because the flow filters in Klaviyo don't work perfectly, you'll need to add like a safety net almost to it. And that's what I'm going to cover here in step 2. So step 2 is flow filters, and this is how you can tell Klaviyo to only send the most relevant flows to your customer, and will work in order of importance. The abandoned checkout, as we've discussed, is the most important flow, and therefore it should have the least amount of flow filters because we want the most amount of people receiving it if they fall into the category of receiving it. So here's what the flow filters should look like, or do look like, in our clients' accounts. So they'll enter when they start checkout, and then the flow filters are placed order 0 times in starting this flow, and then has not been in this flow in the last 7 days. So the only way that potential purchasers won't receive this flow if they start checkout is if they start checkout and purchase, or if they've been in the flow in the last 7 days. So that's pretty straightforward. We can now move on to the abandoned cart here, and this is where you'll get to see the error that most bigger agencies are making. So let's look at the logic of this abandoned cart flow. So to fall into the abandoned checkout flow, in most cases, the customer must have added a product to their cart. This will trigger the added to cart activity, and therefore your customer will also start the abandoned cart flow. So they'll be in both at the same time if they start checkout. So we want to make sure that if they start checkout, they don't receive the abandoned cart flow, because the abandoned checkout flow is a higher converting flow. So there's 2 ways to ensure that they absolutely positively will not receive the abandoned cart flow if they've triggered the abandoned checkout flow. And here's the flow filters, right? So flow filters, checkout started 0 times since starting this flow, and then placed order 0 times since starting this flow, has not been in the flow in the last 14 days. And then this last one here, so received email 0 times in the last 7 days where flow equals X. So let's have a look at them, right? So checkout started 0 times since starting this flow. This one's relatively self-explanatory, and it's what most agencies get right. So if your customer has started checkout since triggering the abandoned cart flow, they will not pass the flow filters and therefore won't receive any emails. However, this is what I mentioned just very briefly earlier. Klaviyo isn't perfect, and this doesn't always work perfectly. So this is why you need to also include this second one here. So received email 0 times where flow equals X. So this filter says that if your customer has received an email from X flow, in this case the abandoned checkout flow, they will not pass the flow filter and therefore will not receive any emails from this flow. So this is why the timing delays become important, because if both the flows are activated at the same time and the abandoned checkout started, like the checkout started filter doesn't work correctly, that's this one here, then your customer will receive the abandoned checkout flow first, given its delay is shorter, as opposed to the abandoned cart flow. So then as a result, the customer will fail to pass the flow filter for the abandoned cart flow because they've received an email from the abandoned checkout flow. Now, so I know it's a little bit confusing because the flows sound similar, but when you look at it here, if they've received an email from the higher converting flow first, because of the time delay, they're going to fail this flow filter here and not receive the email. So I hope that's clear, and we're going to cover this again just in a second here with the abandoned browse flow. So the same rules apply, right? So if your customer has browsed a product, they will trigger the abandoned browse flow through the viewed product trigger. But if they've added to cart or started checkout, we don't want them receiving the abandoned browse flow because the abandoned checkout and cart flows are more profitable. So I hope that makes sense. So when we're looking at the flow filters here, you'll see they look very similar to the abandoned cart one. So checkout started 0 times since starting this flow. Placed order 0 times since starting this flow, hasn't been in the flow in the last 30 days, added to cart 0 times since starting this flow, and then the 2 received email from X flow 0 times filters. So when we look at these flow filters, right, if the customer has started checkout since starting the abandoned browse flow, they're not going to receive it. If they've placed an order, obviously we don't want them to receive it, so they have to have placed an order 0 times to pass into this flow. They've added to cart 0 times since starting this flow. So if they've added a product to cart, we want them receiving the abandoned cart flow, not the abandoned browse flow. And then similar here, right? Received email 0 times in the last 7 days where flow equals, and both of those are abandoned cart and abandoned checkout. So then again, it's the same with the abandoned site section here. We just add more to it. So viewed product 0 times since starting this flow. So this is going to stop them from getting the abandoned browse flow. And then here it's come through instead of doing little letters, which is nice. But you can see here, so I've received email 0 times in the last 30 days where flow equals abandoned browse flow. So if they've received any emails from the abandoned browse flow in the last 30 days, they're going to fail this one here and not receive it. So this is kind of how you ensure that your customers are not overwhelmed with emails and that they're actually receiving the most profitable flow for where they are in the customer journey. So again, this is a little bit more technical of a video. However, it's extremely valuable if you actually care about giving your customers the best experience with your business. Email is a very, very personal touch point, and it's crucial to create lifelong customers. And you're not going to create those customers by sending them multiple flows at the same time and the most irrelevant flow. It's also more profitable for your business to be sending them the correct flows. And that's why I wanted to cover this video and make it its own video because I think it's extremely important. So I hope you enjoyed the video there. If you run an e-commerce company in the UKE or Australia in the golf, coffee or sports nutrition industries and you want to work with us so that we can set all of this up for you as well as implement our whole email marketing strategy, just click the first link in the description and book a call with me. We guarantee a 10 to 20% increase in attributable email revenue in the first 60 days or we'll refund you in full. There's more details on what we'll cover in the call once you click through the link, but it isn't a sales call. That's a promise. I'm not going to ask you to get your credit card out at the end of the call. It's more just to figure out whether or not we can actually help you and whether or not we get along as people. So hope you found the video helpful and informative. And if you manage a brand, I hope to speak with you soon. Take it easy. Bye.